Time and place is everything, especially in marketing. But in today's age of a million messages per minute and not enough hours in a day, how do you really catch your target audience's attention? Fortunately, there's a simple way. LinkedIn can help you speak to the right people at the right time. With LinkedIn becoming #1 in B2B display advertising in the US, you've got a great advantage. You can stand out against your competitors while nurturing customer relationships and growing your brand. LinkedIn delivers you quality and quantity. Its targeting tools allow you to reach your precise audience down to their job title, company name, location, and more, which means your ads are being seen by those who matter. Scale your marketing and grow your business with LinkedIn advertising. As a thank you to their customers for helping them grow 3 times faster than their competition, LinkedIn is offering a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/marketing to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/marketing.
Start with the basics. Get stuff organized. Every account you have, ask the following question. If you don't know the answer, ask somebody. Is there a legal or tax reason I need a separate account? If there's not a legal or tax reason to have a separate account, get rid of it.
Welcome to the FUMS Now podcast show, where you'll gain information, inspiration, and motivation for living your best life with multiple sclerosis. Find us online at FUMSnow.com. I'm your host, Kathy Reagan Young. Hey everybody, welcome back. Thanks for choosing to spend some time with me again today. You're going to be so glad you did. This is going to be one of those episodes that you save and revisit. I'm interviewing an attorney about financial planning with chronic illness. This is really important stuff. But first, let me remind you that I put out a weekly newsletter full of curated MS information for you. It's called the FUMS 6-Pack, and it's got the top 6 topics in MS for that week with links to articles and studies. You don't have to do the work to stay on top of what's going on. Just sign up and get it delivered right to your inbox. Sign up now at FUMSnow.com/getthescoop. Also, if you suffer from bowel and bladder issues due to your MS, a very common issue in MS, I've got a great resource for you, a downloadable ebook called Bowel and Bladder Issues in MS by 2P Brains with Potty Mouths Talking Shit About MS. Just the kind of title you'd expect from FUMS, right? Get yours right now at FUMSnow.com/ebook. My guest today is Martin Shankman, an attorney in private practice in New York. His practice concentrates on estate planning. He's the author of 44 books and more than 1,400 articles and has more titles and accolades than I have time to share. It's because of that I've seriously been trying to book him for an interview for 5 years. Totally worth the wait, by the way. He founded the soon-to-launch chronicillnessplanning.org to educate professional advisors on planning for clients with chronic illness and disabilities. He's active in several charities that serve those living with chronic illness, including the American Brain Foundation and the American Cancer Society, among others. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree from Wharton School, MBA from the University of Michigan, and a law degree from Fordham University School of Law. Whew. Welcome, Marty. So glad to finally have you here.
My pleasure, Kathy. I didn't mean to be hard to get.
No. Well,
we'll do more.
You're in great demand, and you're worth the wait. So, as I referenced in the intro, you have a very impressive resume, but I think one of the most important credentials to mention isn't even on your bio, and it's that your wife has MS. There's something very clarifying about lived experience.
100%. She's been living, well, we only know about it for 15 years. She was diagnosed 15 years ago. One of those incidental findings, right? She had some numbness. We were training for a bike trip. And, oh, by the way, you have spinal cord compression. And, oh, by the way, incidentally, you have MS lesions. It was a tough day. Yeah. It was the only time in our relationship where she actually couldn't talk. She was so shaken. But it's been a 15-year journey, and hopefully we'll continue journeying on for a long time.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but you were an attorney practicing estate planning, and then your wife was diagnosed with MS, and you recognized how different planning has to look for people with chronic illness. And then you sort of changed your approach to estate planning. Is that right?
There was nothing published that I was aware of in any of the legal or tax services that deal with estate planning that attorneys and financial advisors and accountants subscribe to on chronic disease. So I kind of made one of my life missions to create resources for professional advisors to help them better help clients. I think you don't go into a professional service industry because it's service industry, right? You enjoy helping people, like accounting or finance or wealth management or insurance. It's also about the reward you feel helping people. So I think the advisors, if there's resources available, will read them to be able to help their clients. But there were no such resources. So I've been creating them. And I've written scores of articles on planning, not only for MS, but lots of different chronic diseases. And I keep marching on.
Yes, and thank you for doing that. How does estate planning differ in people with chronic illness from just the general public?
Let me make a general comment, and this is really important for your listeners. First of all, never suspend common sense. Never suspend practical thinking. Don't get siloed. Okay, now I'm doing an estate plan. Now I'm doing a financial plan. Now I'm doing insurance planning. Think holistically, think practically. And don't assume, even if you hire the best team of professional advisors, they haven't a clue what you're going through, because MS can be a very different experience for everyone that has it. Not only because of the disease differences, but your situational differences. So make sure you apply practicality. I think that the difference is, and let me answer it in a lousy way first. Every human being that goes for estate and financial planning, every human being has their own unique nuances, right? Your family structure, however you define family, right? Your economics, your wishes, how you live, your lifestyle relative to your resources. Everybody's planning needs to really be tailored to them as a human being. And frankly, whether it's any chronic illness or specifically MS, your planning needs to be tailored to you and your experience with MS. And I find that too often, much of the resources that are available to consumers are boilerplate. They're standardized. And unless your name is standard and yours isn't, it's Kathy, it ain't going to work.
Right.
It's not going to work. And that's one of the important things we have to talk about throughout this program, is how you can make little tweaks or changes to standard planning to make it work for your experience of MS, right? If you have $100,000 in the bank and somebody else has $10 million in the bank, even if your disease experience is identical, your planning can't be.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Great point. Great point. And I want to be that one with the 10 million, by the way, if I have my choice.
I'll give you some lottery numbers after the
Excellent. Thank you so much. I have read a lot of your articles, and there's so much to take in and deal with and execute. So for the purposes of this episode, I've listed what I gleaned to be perhaps the most important, or at least the first steps for setting up your financial and estate planning with MS in mind. I just want to tell everybody that I'm referencing the article in particular that's called Estate and Financial Planning for Those Living with Multiple Sclerosis, and I'll link to that in the show notes so you can read the whole thing.
Kathy, if you email me separately, I'll give you any articles I find that I have the ability to give you legally, so you can post any of those things if you want to help people. I have a whole bunch of stuff.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's great. Thank you. In this article, you referenced kind of a 12-step plan, and this was important. Before you begin, gather information, select advisors, right? Attorney, CPA, investment advisor, financial planner, insurance consultant, all really important. But do you really need all those various professionals? Because that's really costly. Is there a minimum team? The B team, maybe? I don't know. What can we?
we're going to give you a practical answer, but I'm gonna be difficult. Let me first answer or respond to a comment you made that is really important. Then let's talk about the team.
Sure.
And no, you don't need to spend $1 zillion, and you don't need to spend more money than you have on your advisors. Excellent. But hold that for 1 second. Okay. You made a comment that's really critical: organizing your data.
Yes.
First of all, many people with MS struggle with fatigue. My wife struggles daily with fatigue. The more hyper organized you are, the more simplified your life, the safer and easier it is. We have any financial resources we have in a total of 2 places: one bank, one investment place. And we're slowly even trying to eliminate the bank and just have it in one place, because dealing with one person is a lot easier than dealing with 2. And honestly, the typical client I see, and it has nothing to do with how much money they have stuff scattered all over the place. I've seen people with 6, 8 different banks they're dealing with. Why?
Right.
Why?
And it's so stressful. That's really stressful. Yes. We all know what stress does to MS.
Not good. Stress
Not
and MS
good.
do not get along.
No.
And think about the following. We're going to talk about a power of attorney, which is one of the critical documents where you name somebody, an agent it's called, to take care of financial, legal, tax matters if you can't, right? And there's special modifications and perspectives you need on that for MS, and hopefully we'll get to it. If not, you got to have me back and we're going to do more programs.
Excellent.
But think about naming an agent. Lawyers will often not talk about this because it has nothing to do with the legal document. They'll prepare a power of attorney. You go on to Rocket Lawyer, LegalZoom, or any of the myriad of different legal websites, you can get a power of attorney. But if you have 12 different bank and brokerage and investment accounts, how is anybody you name going to ever deal with that?
Yeah.
If you get fatigue, if you have cognitive fog, which is also not uncommon, how are you going to deal with that? Think of how easy and safe it is if you consolidate all your assets at one institution. And what most of the institutions will do now is give you a composite statement. So if you have a trust, and if we have time, we'll get to it. If not, you got to have me back, and we're going to talk about why everyone has to have a trust. We're going to talk about accounts in your own name, about retirement accounts. You can't mix and match those. You need to keep them separate. So even somebody with not a lot of wealth may have 3 or 4 different accounts, right? An IRA, a rollover IRA, or a Roth IRA. If they got a kid, a 529 plan. You could have a half a dozen accounts, even if you're not wealthy. If you have them all at one financial firm, and they can give you a snapshot picture so you can go to one screen and see everything, it makes monitoring and protecting yourself really easy.
Yes.
And think of when an agent comes in to help you, a friend, family, whoever it may be, they have one place to go, one professional to deal with.
Yep.
So I didn't mean to get off track because you asked about advisors, but you mentioned organizing. That is so important. And it's ignored by most people because, I got to work on my asset allocation. I need a fancy revocable trust document. Start with the basics. Get stuff organized.
I love that.
And here's the golden rule. Every account you have, ask the following question. If you don't know the answer, ask somebody. Is there a legal or tax reason I need a separate account? If there's not a legal or tax reason you have to have a separate account, get rid of it. My wife and I each have to have separate IRA accounts. We can't mix them. Everything we own is in revocable trust because it's safer, and that's something that you all should think about. So we have to have at least 4 accounts, right? IRA for each of us, Rev Trust for each of us.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't need more accounts than that, get rid of them. Keep it simple. Now,
love that.
So that's really, and by the way, it costs nothing to do it.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Oh, listen,
consolidate and simplify.
I'm already feeling better about myself right now because what you just described is exactly what I've undertaken in the last year. I am trying to simplify and streamline my entire life because this sort of thing was causing me incredible stress, which dialed up my anxiety, my stress, and my symptoms. My MS did not like this. MS doesn't like the mess. Hashtag.
By the way, it ain't good for anybody.
Right. So exactly.
I guess I'm technically a caregiver, although my wife, if we're honest, she really takes care of me. But nobody does well with stress. And you know what? Whether you're a caregiver or you're living with MS, get rid of the complications. Yes. Get rid of the cobwebs. Nobody needs that stuff.
Simplify.
Now, let me answer your other question, which is really important. And I want to frame this in a different way than most people approach it. So let's start with the gold standard. And that's something we should do. And again, you're going to need me back because we're not going to get through all of this. And I want it practical and actionable. And we need time to get through that. The gold standard for each thing we're going to talk about. But then you have to dial back to what works for you. What works for you depends on your circumstances. It depends on how much money you have. It depends on a whole lot of things. Let's start with the gold standard. Ideally, everyone should have a CPA doing their income tax return and helping with tax planning. And if you're living with MS, if you modify your home or you have other significant medical expenses, you want a CPA to not only do your tax return, but to do planning. And most people that have CPAs haven't fill out tax returns, don't get the planning. That's one category. You want an estate planning attorney to help you with all the documents, but to make them practical and to work for your experience of MS. Right? If you're married and you have a spouse that you're a partner that you can rely on 100% to take care of things, that makes planning a lot safer and easier. If you have really close friends or family you can rely on 100%, planning is easier. A lawyer can help you do that. But if you don't have that safety net of people, and lots of people don't, you got to do other things. So a lawyer's the second member of the team.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you got to have somebody that does financial planning, investment planning, right? It's not just about the investment allocation and what you invest in, but it's about your budget and about everything else. CPAs can help with that. Financial advisors are critical to that. Insurance consultant. Everybody has to have insurance. And don't tell me you can't get insurance. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about insurance broadly. You have a home or you're renting an apartment, you got to have renters or homeowners insurance. You drive a car, you better have an auto policy. And I think better than that, or in addition to that, you probably need an umbrella or excess liability policy, because if somebody gets hurt, you get in a bad accident, you got an issue. And oh, by the way, unique to MS, if you're in an accident, Kathy, and somebody discovers when they're suing you, or you're suing them and they cross-claim, right? Because we in America love to sue each other. Oh, she had MS. And they look up online and they discover that for MS, fatigue or cognitive issues are common. And by the way, even if you have cognitive issues, I mean, it doesn't mean that it's significant. For some people, it tragically is. But for many people, it's just a little fog here and there. It doesn't affect your ability to drive whatsoever. But how does that play out if there's a jury?
Yeah.
They're going to get up and say, Kathy, you caused that accident because of your fatigue and your cognitive issues. Prove that you didn't.
Right.
But by the way, when you have a challenge like MS, even if you don't have any significant issues or symptoms, make sure you have an excess liability policy, because that may be something that somebody argues if you ever are in an accident. Wow. So you need an insurance consultant, right? So now to summarize, a lawyer, you need an estate planning lawyer, you need an accountant, a financial advisor, wealth advisor, and an insurance consultant. If you're going on Medicaid, you need a Medicaid or elder law specialist. I do estate planning. I don't do Medicaid planning. It's a different subspecialty. You may need that member on your team. And the list may grow. Now, if you have the financial wherewithal to hire these professionals, don't be a cheapskate. Do it right. Yeah. If you get really qualified professionals, and we could even do a program on that and just talk about how to marshal and make the professionals work not only efficiently, but effectively. Because often they don't, because they don't talk to each other. Everyone's in their own silo. Now, if you can afford it, that's the way to go. No questions asked. That's the way to go. Have a collaborative team of experts help you.
The doors to the Patients Getting Paid membership community are now wide open. This is a community of people with chronic illness learning to find and create flexible remote work that accommodates their health. I call us chronicpreneurs. There are trainings, coaching calls, networking opportunities, co-workings, and a ton of resources. Want to take better care of yourself and still generate an income? Join us at patientsgettingpaid.com.
Now, reality. Some people can afford some of that. Some people can afford none of that. Now, one of the things that's helped those living with MS and chronic disease and disabilities generally, the internet is amazing, but you have to be careful. So if you can't afford any of that, let's do that extreme, and then let's talk about the middle. And then we're going to probably be running out of time, but we'll get as far as we can. But I'd rather give substantive information than rush and not tell people.
So appreciate that.
Because
give us the nuggets.
If you don't get stuff organized and you don't get the right team, it's not going to work. Now, if you can't afford any of that, what do you do? Well, here's what I suggest. You're going to have to go online and use online resources, LegalZoom, Rocket Lawyer. There's lots of websites. I don't have any interest in any of them. And you should look into them and decide which to use. But there's ways to do that effectively. But what are you doing? Let's take the big picture. The gold standard, we said, is to have an attorney, an accountant, a financial advisor, et cetera. If you can't afford any of that, you're going to use an online resource for a lawyer. You need that function filled. So the idea, the template of all these advisors, you're going to mimic that as best as you can. An accountant, you may use TurboTax or Tax Cut or one of the online services to do your tax return. They have a lot of resources. But you see what you're doing is you're using less expensive approaches to mimic what the gold standard is. Now, let's talk for a minute about how to do that, because this is really important for a lot of people. Let me tell you what most lawyers will do when you ask them about online legal document preparation services. They'll just diss them and say they're awful and you shouldn't do it. You have to hire a lawyer. And they're not doing it out of greed. They're doing it because they just think, how can you possibly get the knowledge that I have, for example, for 40 years of doing this from an online service? As artificial intelligence gets more robust, you're going to get closer and closer. But I don't know how much of that's really built into these online services yet. It's gonna happen. But what you need to do is the following. The biggest beef I have with the online services is you could go online and prepare for yourself a power of attorney. That's great. And if you can't afford a lawyer, you need everyone on this call. If you're 18 and over, you got to have a power of attorney. You got MS, you better have a power of attorney, and it better be durable, and we'll talk about that. But instead, what they do is you can go on to these services and just fill out a form. You have no background. You have no knowledge. What I wish the online legal document prep services would do, okay, now you paid to get a power of attorney. Before we let you fill out the questionnaire to get a power of attorney, you're going to watch a 1-hour video that trains you about what a power of attorney is about. If they would do that one thing, and one other thing I'm going to tell you, because these will help people practically deal with that, you'd be in a much better place. So what am I recommending? If you can hire an estate planning specialist, great, do it. If you can't, and you're going to use an online service, there's three things you should do. First, get educated before you start it. Don't think that if you have a question, you can click an icon and it'll give you a little bit of information on something. It's not enough. You need to have the big picture and understand it. So if you're going to do a power of attorney, first thing first, get educated. Find online resources, articles, video clips. I have a free legal website, Law Easy. I try to put stuff on there. I'll add more. And if you give me a list of stuff you want, I'll create video clips. And if you want to use those video clips on your side, I'll give them to you too, specifically to help educate people. That's step one. Step two, one of the problems, if the big online websites had come to Marty and asked me to prepare and design their templates, I would have gone about it very differently. You can go on to LegalZoom and do a simple document like a power of attorney. And I've done that on Rocket Lawyer. I think I did it just to experience. Yeah. So I would talk from experience.
Yeah.
They have too many options. You can, in fact, get more options and do different and more things with an online service than many lawyers will do for you. That's not necessarily a positive. It sounds seductively good because it's overwhelming, but it sounds great because, wow, I can really tailor this. The problem is without the legal judgment, it would be better if they took a different approach with the online services and had the fewest choices, limit the choices to what you really need to do. So the second recommendation, if you're doing it online, is try to limit how fancy you get. You don't want lots of options unless they're really necessary, because every option raises yet different legal or practical issues. You don't need to go there. Keep it simpler. And the third recommendation is really powerful, really important. And I wish all the online services would recommend this. Watch a video, read something and get educated. Don't go for fancy, go for what you need. And the third point, get a team, get a partner. One of the things that I can do as a lawyer that you, Kathy, and any of your listeners can't do for themselves is I can be objective. Forget my legal training. If you tell me something that doesn't make sense, I can say, Kathy, it sounds good, but it doesn't make sense. You can't, I can't do that for myself. When I do legal work for myself or financial plan, I hire people.
Yeah.
I may know stuff they don't know, but I can't be objective about Marty. You just can't.
Great
you can
point.
try, but you can't. So here's what I recommend. On the idea of a legal document, if you're Kathy, you're going to go online and get a power of attorney, get 2, 3, 4 friends. I don't think you want more than 3 or 4, right? But if you got 3 or 4 friends and you guys said, all right, we're going to do a power of attorney this month. Don't overwhelm yourself. One document, one step, one action a month. We're going to meet and first get educated. Then we're going to talk about it. We're going to then talk about how MS affects the general stuff that we've read. Because if you practically get 3, 4 people together, you're all going to have some practical ideas. Keep in mind the golden rule of don't get fancy. Keep it as basic as you can. And then we're going to go on and prepare the documents, but we're going to do it as a group. If you have 3 friends with you and you get to the point of selecting an agent, which is the most important thing, who are you going to trust to do it? Now, you may have a spouse or a partner. You may have a brother that's totally ethical. I've had people that don't have that, and they've named neighbors. Worries me when you name a neighbor or a friend to be your agent. Do they really have your best interest at heart? The biggest source of financial abuse, and I hate the phrase elder financial abuse, it's terrible because they ignore the fact that you can be 30 years old living with MS and still be subject to abuse because of the cognitive fog or fatigue that you're experiencing, right? So it shouldn't be elder abuse. It should just really be abuse of anybody with any type of weakness of any sort.
Yeah.
But if you have 3, 4 friends, one of your friends may say, hey, Kathy, I know that person you're naming. You really trust them? Is that really appropriate? I know he's your brother or she's your sister or she's your aunt, but you told me stories years ago about such and such.
Right.
Is that really who you want to have? So if you can get a group of 3 or 4 people, now you can start to mimic the gold standard, get that objectivity a professional gives you, give some extra insight, get the education, and now you go forward. Now,
Brilliant.
If you're going to do your own tax return, get a friend together. Help each other if you're not uncomfortable sharing financial information. If you're uncomfortable, maybe get a family member to do it. Anytime you can have somebody collaborate with you, you're going to help each other.
So true. So true. I love that.
That's how I would use it. You want to mimic the gold standard. If you're going to do financial planning and you can't afford somebody, don't say you can't afford somebody, because a lot of the major financial firms, they'll give you financial planning assistance for no extra charge.
Wow.
And all the financial firms have a wealth of incredible online tools and libraries and resources. Whoever you're using, go online and see what they have on their website. Some of the stuff it's remarkable. And with computer technology, stuff that you used to have to pay somebody to do, you can get some, I'm not saying that what you're going to get for free online from a particular firm is the same as getting an independent financial advisor. That's why having an independent advisor is the gold standard. But boy, if you can't afford it, go online and see what they have. Ask what's available.
Yeah, I love that. I love this is so all practical and I love it. Thank you for all of this. And you're just spitting nuggets at this point. We're all very usable.
By the way, something else I said just to emphasize, I can talk too much. You have to shut me up.
No.
But what I said where you pick a form or a plan or a step a month and do it with a group of people, that's what you want to do to get this stuff done. The vast, vast majority of people, I think half of Americans don't have wills. I think more than half of lawyers don't have wills.
Oh, jeez.
And you need a power of attorney more than a will, folks.
Ooh.
But the point is, pick something you can get done. Be deliberate. Try to mimic the gold standard. Do one thing a month or one thing every 2 months.
Yeah.
Because if you just start making progress, in a year from now, you'll look back and go, wow, look at all I've accomplished.
Look what
I've simplified. I've consolidated. I got basic documents in place. That's huge.
It is huge. It is huge. And it's such a weight off of your shoulders. I can speak to this in this is what I've been working so hard on in the last year to do exactly what you're describing. And with each step that I took, I felt lighter. I just felt like, okay, check. I love a list where I get to check anyway.
My wife and I, we just put together for the first time in about a year and a half or 2 years, a detailed budget. We put together a detailed financial statement, and we did the financial statement where we listed and we password protected it, but we did it with all the account numbers, all the contact information. So it's not just a financial statement to see numbers, but it's a financial statement that if there's a God forbid that happens, right? And that's what all this planning is about, because there's a long list of God forbids that can happen.
Right.
But it's now a roadmap for somebody to help us if anything happens. Yeah. And I got to tell you, I felt great doing that.
Yeah. And if you look at it through the filter that you just said, the person that the person, whomever you've listed, to simplify it for them. I mean, a lot of us can't do things for ourselves, but we can do them for others. So look at it like, somebody's going to have to pick up the pieces. Who will that be? And how simple can you make it for them? The less burden, the better.
Give them a roadmap. Give them a roadmap.
I love that. I wondered if you thought this made sense. If you are working with a planning team, if you can afford that and you're working with kind of this planning team, it seems to me like it would make a lot of sense to put together a document that really explains MS kind of in general, and then your own experience and symptoms and your concerns for the future because of your looking through your MS lens, because most people have no idea what MS does, the possibility of what it could become, and certainly your concerns therein. So I would think doing something like that would be helpful, right?
I'll go a step further. I think it's a brilliant idea. I explain it usually similarly but different. But if you hire any professionals, they won't understand what your experience is with MS.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that very specifically. And by the way, folks, if somebody tells you they're an expert on legal work for MS, they're an expert on financial planning for people with MS, go someplace else.
Yeah.
If you're going to
100%.
hire advisors, you want a really smart accountant, you want a really smart financial advisor, you want a smart lawyer. You want someone that understands and thinks, but there's no such thing as a specialty with chronic disease or MS.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying that as somebody who's probably written more articles in the professional literature on planning for chronic disease than anyone. It doesn't make me an expert on chronic disease, and I don't hold myself out as that. I hope I'm just a good lawyer. So you don't want someone that's gimmicky. You know, it's like you'll see accountants that specialize in
Great
doctors.
tip.
What does that mean?
Right.
But even if somebody's very knowledgeable, so my wife has been living with MS for 15 years. I've published probably 20 articles on planning for MS in lectures, but I don't know what Kathy's going through.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't tell me what your situation is,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to help you.
Yeah.
And once you tell me about the challenges that you have, I still need to have, even if it's a wild guess, what is the prognosis? What do you anticipate happening?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not even enough either.
Right.
What are your sources of income? What's your cash flow? What kind of insurance do you have? What's your family structure? However you define that term. Who do you have to rely on? So even if I could, you remember the Star Trek days, the replicator? So even if I replicated Kathy,
Yeah.
right? And I had another Kathy, you know, her family structure might be different, even if the economics and disease are the same.
Yeah.
So you need to explain that to somebody, because otherwise they can't help you plan.
Right.
My planning
Love it.
for you, if you have nobody to rely on, is got to be different than if you have 6 sisters and brothers who you can trust with your life.
Right. That's so
Most
true.
people, frankly, don't have that.
Nope. You're right. I love that. This is all so good. So I referenced that wonderful article that you wrote, and I will put that in the show notes so everybody can see it. But you've been so gracious. Can we circle back to those things and just maybe
We got a lot to cover. Let's go through it.
Oh my gosh.
I think if we do enough of these, we can give, and I want to summarize before you cut me off at the end.
Oh, I'm not cutting you off.
If we're done. No,
Keep
but
going.
before we end, we got to do a summary, because what I like to do, you know about the matchbook theory?
No.
Oh,
What's the matchbook theory?
When I give a lecture or a presentation or a podcast, I want everyone to leave where they could write down on the back of a matchbook, right? It's like this big, enough actionable steps that they say, boy, that was worth the time.
Takeaway.
So we want to summarize those actionable steps at the end. But I think if we go through each of these topics, not rushing them, but talking in a little depth like we have today, we can give people real actionable steps.
I love that. And I so appreciate that. I just have one more question about what we've been talking about here today,
Keep
which
going.
is, let's just pretend that you did all these things that you've suggested. How often should you update and review and revise?
I tell all my clients that if they don't have an annual review, their planning won't work.
Okay.
Now, many lawyers will say, oh, you come back in 5 years and you'll update your will. Well, did you just get married, divorced, a spouse or partner die? Did you hit the lottery and have that $10 million in the bank that you didn't have when we started the show? You know, I'll use the polite term for it, but stuff happens,
yes, right?
I won't be as colorful as you were before.
Well, yeah.
Stuff,
I mean, it's FUMS. You can say whatever you want on the show, but go ahead.
I know, but
that was
stuff
very
happens.
nice. Okay, good.
Stuff happens. And you need to update every aspect of your planning whenever it's appropriate to update it. That's a correct statement. Now, what does that mean? I don't know. You know, what's changed in your life? The reason I tell people to review everything annually is stuff does change. You know what? We just did a budget. We hadn't probably done one for at least 2 years, maybe 3. And everything in our life's changed because we moved to a new home, all the expenses, everything's different.
Yeah.
And not only the expenses are different, but where we look for to find the information is all different.
Mm-hmm.
So I told my wife, you know what? I want to do this again in 6 months when we have a better handle on what utilities and taxes and all this. Right.
Yeah.
So one of the things you'll find if you update stuff more frequently, it's just easier to do.
It's easier.
If you wait 2-3 years to do a budget and now 3/4 of the items that are line items in your budget have changed, it's a lot more work.
Oh, yeah.
If you do it as you go, you're making little tweaks. It's easier and it's very efficient. We have, and this is something I recommend, and if we could dig into the consolidation and organization of finances, everything in our life that's financial is on Quicken. We have, and I'm not recommending Quicken. I don't own stock in whatever company owns Quicken, but we have both had everything for decades on Quicken. So if we need to do a budget, which we just did, I can go to Quicken and print out a 2-year comparative expense statement right out of Quicken. It takes a minute.
Right.
And then my wife and I sit down and I write notes. I like to print it and physically write notes, even though everything we do is pretty much electronic and computerized. But I like to physically sit down and look at it with her. We talk it through. We write notes and discuss things because what happened in the last year or two, it may be too high, maybe too low. We address it. And really, in a couple of hours, we have a pretty realistic budget. Mm-hmm. This time was a challenge because we moved, so everything's kind of changed. And that's why we're going to redo it. But if you get organized, this stuff isn't that hard. Your legal documents. I just spoke to a woman yesterday who needs to update documents. And we're going to redo her will and her revocable trust, which we have to have a session to talk about.
Deal.
But she decided that she's not going to really change her healthcare proxy and living will that deal with healthcare decisions, because even though the documents are reasonably old, nothing's really changed in them. But you don't know. The will has to be redone for other reasons we can't go into. But, you need to do what's right for you. You need to keep it current. Insurance coverage, right? What if the value of your home is doubled? You better get your insurance increased, right? Kathy won that $10 million lottery and bought a giant diamond ring. You better get that listed on your homeowners.
I like how you continually bring it back to me winning 10 million, because I'm feeling like you're speaking that into the universe, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
No, listen, the vibes may help. You never know.
I like it. Thank you.
But everybody's life is different, right? We all think we have control over things. We all plan. There's an old phrase, man plans, God laughs, right?
Truth.
I mean, who knows?
And things change all the time. Yeah.
And you never know what's going to change. And what changes for you this year, Kathy, may not change for you for the next 10 years. But, my moving to a new house, I know changed a whole bunch of stuff, and it's in a different state. We have to, and it's on our short list. We got to update all our documents because our documents have our prior domicile, Connecticut, is the state governing our will and everything. We got to change it.
Oh, gosh,
looking at everything really makes a lot of sense. And listen, look at the world. If I told you 2 years ago we'd be running around with masks and everything else, who would have imagined?
Great point.
The world changes. The stock market, depending how much you've had in the market or not, your situation may be dramatically different or not different at all.
So true. So organize and check back often. There's a good takeaway right there.
There's another reason too. A lot of people find this stuff really distasteful and unpleasant. Doing a budget should not be a 4-letter word.
Oh,
It's not.
It's not. How about that? But I think of it as one.
You know what? If you just make a habit of spending a couple of hours every weekend doing something, like I said, this month's project, get together 3 friends, learn online about a power of attorney, and then at the end of the month, after learning and talking to your friends and making decisions, all of you go online, help each other, and prepare a power of attorney and get it signed.
I love that.
That's this month's project.
Yeah.
Next month, let's do a budget, right? The month after, let's see how we can simplify and consolidate all our resources. But if you just make it a habit, it's not so hard.
Yeah.
For a stupid analogy, it's like exercise, right? Everybody wants to lose weight and be fit and do all this, right?
But not exercise.
And there's really 2 ways to do it. Eat healthy, exercise.
Yeah.
Right?
We all know it, but who wants to do it? Let's be honest. Or is that just me talking out loud?
No, but you know what? If you make it a habit, you don't think about it.
That's so true.
All the stuff we're talking about, if you would just carve out a few hours a week or every other week if it's too much for you.
Right.
Just do it.
Well, and you're talking too about, having, whether it's a spouse, a partner, or friends. I mean, accountability is really, it's helpful. They're helpful, but also having accountability, because if it's just you, it's really easy to keep pushing it off. So says Kathy,
Absolutely.
who continues to push stuff off. But I like that idea.
I'll have my wife pester you like she pesters me.
Oh, good. I could use
You
your
said
wife.
you were going to blank.
Well, as
right?
we're saying this, I'm kind of formulating in my head, maybe through FUMS, I should do something that is kind of an accountability, like, hey, this month we're doing POAs. Who's in?
I love it.
Yeah, maybe we'll do something like that. So keep an eye on the socials.
We can come back and do a program, at least for the topics that relate to what I can guide on. We'll do a program a month that gives you oh
my gosh,
step by step what to do for that one topic.
I love that.
Because the problem, even with what we've covered now, I mean, I just scribbled down some notes. We talked about consolidating and organizing your assets, but we really didn't get into any great detail on that. And there's a lot of good information on what to do with that. We talked about putting a team together or mimicking the team if you can't afford the team. We didn't really talk about in between.
Right.
We talked about the professional advisors, but we barely touched upon the details of what each role is. And it's important, even if you can't afford it, to understand what those roles are and what they do. And we talked about, like you just said, doing something each month. That's already a lot of things for people to absorb and act on. But if you pick a topic a month or even every other month to make it less stressful, if you pick every other month and everyone does 6 major things before the end of the year, you got all your stuff organized. We spent a session on that. You start to set up and mimic a team or get a team if you can afford it. Then we start maybe with a budget. You can look back after a year and say, wow, look at how much I've accomplished.
Yeah, very actionable. I love it. Marty Shankman is amazing. The amount of valuable information and actionable content exceeded our usual time constraints, so we decided to break it into 2 episodes. Be sure to check out the second half of this phenomenal interview on the next episode of the FUMS Podcast Show. Quick shout out to Steve Woodward at podcastingeditor.com for the fantastic work on this podcast, including editing, show notes, and ingenious ideas. If you'd like help with your podcast, whether you're just starting out or an old pro, visit podcastingeditor.com and tell Steve I sent you. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate you listening to the FUMS Podcast Show. Be sure to subscribe to it so you won't miss an episode. You can do that right on the website at FUMSnow.com. While you're there, sign up for the free email list so you'll be among the first to know of any new findings in MS research, new therapies and products, as well as any blog posts and podcast episodes I release. Want to chat with others in the FUMS community? Join us on Facebook at FUMS Now. Thanks again, and don't forget to talk to the stupid disease as it deserves. Tell it FUMS every day.